Right, good evening, councillors. We're a minute late, I'm afraid. There's a hitch with the chairman again. But anyway, let's get on with it. Let's go through we're not expecting any fire alarms or anything of that sort. So if it does go off, it means that we will be having a fire, and we go out that door and into the park and assemble. The meeting is going to be webcast, so we're all on our best behaviour and keep smiling. And obviously, switch your phones to silence, please, or switch it off. Thank you. Right, have we got any apologies or substitutions we're aware of? I'm aware of no substitutions. Have we got any apologies from anybody? No? Other than Councillor Golding, who's on maternity leave, so we will register that, but it seems, yeah, we'll register that, thank you. Declaration of interest. Has anybody got any declarations of interest? No? There's no urgent matters I'm aware of. Minutes of the last meeting on the 29th of September. Are we happy with those minutes, or do we agree? Yep. Yep. Turn the page. Right, item 5, response of Cabinet to report of the committee, which is page 11 to 14. Sorry.
Inviting Councillor Bounds.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Oh, who are you? Oh, yeah, Councillor Bounds is going to be talking to us as leader of the council and cabinet member. Councillor Bounds, when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Just really to repeat what I said at a full council meeting, I know you did get this document just before full council meeting, but just to go through welcoming your comments at the last scrutiny meeting. The document that we have in front of us really talks through the response as far as the recommendations. Some, of course, we can absolutely amend the KPIs immediately. Some things we'll have to do some investigation. Other things, I suspect that investigation will need looking at through the new council plan, which is out for consultation because it's draft. And also perhaps some more advice on others, because although I welcome the spirit of some of the recommendations, I suspect there are others outside of this council who may have a better expertise to inform the KPIs. So we certainly had a conversation about trees and canopy and by ward, where I believe the Woodland Trust have some really useful information that I suspect will not only help form what the KPI should look like, but I suspect also what the detail of any specific item in the council plan or service plan should look like as well.
Have we got any questions for the leaders? Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Simon, and appreciate the report coming back on the agenda as well, because it's nice to read it in association with scrutiny, and I think if we follow that process in the future, that would be really helpful, so thank you. Just picking up that point about trees, I guess what falls out of the peer review that we've had recently and what falls out of the conversation that we're having between Cabinet and members is perhaps the relationship between the KPIs and developing them just in the way you've been describing yourself. So, for example, if we have in the Green Infrastructure Strategy a specific target that relates to tree canopies, then the follow-through on that on KPIs is worth exploring, and I see where you're coming from in terms of the Woodland Trust. And there are more than examples throughout on that basis. If that is the spirit in which we could go forward with Cabinet, so that we're exploring what a new set of KPIs will look like with the new council plan, what the old KPIs could transform into in relation to the comments that have been passed by others to help guide us and advise us, and then also all the questions we were asking, that I think would be really constructive. So if that's on the table between the chair and yourself to discuss how we as a committee could get involved in that would be really, really useful, I think.
More than happy to do that, Chair. I think obviously we've got the draft plan up for consultation. I've spent quite a lot of time with the Chief Exec going out and talking to some of our partners, because we know, don't we, that some of those partners are much better at some of those topic areas than we are. So I'm quite hopeful that through that work collaboratively with both our partners and with fellow members in the authority, that we can come up with some really meaningful KPIs that really demonstrate, particularly in the structure of the new draft council plan, that we can be really clear about those KPIs that directly relate to what we're responsible for and directly deliver, and those that our partners will sign up to that they are responsible for delivering, and we can have influence in what they commit to as their targets, in addition to what their statutory responsibilities are as well.
Jackie?
Thank you. I think, like Councillor Harvey's just said, I actually welcome the fact we've got this here, and this is really good. And also we do have a performance panel meeting that we're going to have in January, which gives us an option to talk through some of these performance measures. And there are some things that I'll talk about when we get to the council plan as well, which relates to all this sort of stuff. But I think something that might be helpful to think about in the way of doing this is obviously what are the outcomes we're looking for with this stuff. Now, obviously, we've come up, because often it's very easy to come up with, and I mean, I was one of the people talked about this only from talking to the tree officers that I became aware of the whole canopy cover thing, which is why it was raised. So the outcome is obviously we're looking to make sure that we are improving our tree cover. And so it's a suggestion, I think, that's come through in a performance indicator, which might be jumping the gun in the fact that really it's about the outcome. What is it we want to achieve? And maybe that's something that we need to bring into the conversation around the whole performance measurements, which could actually be more beneficial, because then we can explore all the relevant options, including partners, but making sure that we actually get all that together, which can then work for everyone.
Really happy to have that conversation. I think that's what I absolutely mean at the core, really, that says we can talk about that output, but in different landscapes, in different wards, there may be a different answer. If we thought about the landscapes and the ecology around places like Whitchurch and Overton, it might well be that it's about wetlands, it may be about blue carbon, it may be about thinking about, well, what does that really mean for all those other things that we can do at the same time, rather than dealing with individual KPIs, because it might be that we can do carbon, maybe that we can do biodiversity improvement, and we may be able to do water quality all at the same time. So I welcome having that really sort of in-depth and breadth of conversation, Chair.
Sorry, I can't stop.
Thank you. Sorry, completely off topic. I think we've got a technical issue with the webcast. People can't hear the sound. Okay. 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 So I just had a report. So.
Is there any more questions for the leader? And we've picked up on the issues. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and we'll speak to you later this evening. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, members. So we're here this evening with the draft parking strategy, which links to the town centre, the master plan, to sort of how we see our future development and the potential for our town centre to be. So this parking strategy will contribute towards the sort of making of the master plan, town centre master plan. And there are a few issues around sort of an accessibility of the town centre, which was addressed, and we've been consulting, and your comments today will be the useful to add towards the consultation feedback that we've been receiving. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Mr. Lambert.
Thanks, Chair. Just leading off from what Councillor Ganesh said, the strategy before you this evening sits amongst the various other strategies that have been adopted or are currently emerging from both the Borough Council and the County Council. Just to set the scene, as Councillor Ganesh said, it supports the Town Centre Master Plan, but it also closely aligns with the Transport Strategy, which we've jointly adopted with Hampshire, the emerging LC WIP, the Walking and Cycling Infrastructure Plan, which is important in terms of improving accessibility by those modes. And importantly, it also aligns very closely with the adopted climate change and air quality strategy, which is all around reducing emissions, getting people to walk and cycle and to access the town centre in different ways. By way of background, I'm sure members will appreciate there have been changes in the way that we travel and the way that we work and shop. Typically, people are now working in a hybrid fashion. They're perhaps shopping in different manners as well, and that's had an impact upon the demand for parking spaces in the town. I suppose what we've seen is that the demand for parking spaces has changed, and whilst some car parks remain popular, there are certainly some car parks in the town centre that are less popular than pre-COVID, pre-lockdown. We've undertaken some analysis of ticket sales before lockdown and ticket sales post, the release and resumption of normal life, as it were. And we've seen that demand has in fact changed. I've confirmed this myself just by an unscientific walk around the town centre on a few Saturdays, just to see how car parks are being used. And indeed, some of the ones in the town central area are still popular. They're not quite as popular as you may have seen before. I think you would have previously seen people circling for a spot in Central Car Park, and that's not been the case that I've observed recently. And there are some other car parks that are less well used. I think what the strategy really recognises that it's a framework within which we can take future decisions. It's not actually taking decisions at this time, but it's enabling us to kind of set the scene for any decisions we may wish to take in the future. It also highlights things around the rollout of EV charging points, which we're keen to support, as well as highlighting some opportunities to improve drop-off and set-down points, for example, as well as recognising that some car parks perform specific roles, for example, in supporting the church or the mosque, or supporting Fairfield School, for example. So we're aware that there are some specific roles there for the car parks. As Councillor Ganesh highlighted, we are looking for members' views this evening to inform the portfolio holder prior to a cabinet decision on adoption of the strategy in December. So we're keen to hear your views on what you think about it. Peter Smith, my colleague here, is going to outline some of the feedback from the consultation that's been undertaken recently, to outline to you some of the trends we've noticed.
Okay, thank you, Mark. There's a lot to consider. We've received well over 100 responses, which we've analysed in a very short space of time. So I'm conscious that what you see in the report before you will differ from what I'm going to tell you now. So this is a verbal update on where we are now. So we've actually cranked through the analysis very, very quickly within a week to be where we are today. So please be aware that the figures you've got in your report may not actually coincide with what I'm about to tell you now. So we undertook a public engagement exercise between the 17th of October and the 14th of November, which was advertised on social media, through email contact, via press releases, in the Discovery Centre, and as well as in car parks, in an effort to get responses from as many people as possible. So I'm going to give you a very high-level canter through the results of what we found so far. So in total, we received 182 responses through the survey and through email, which we think has provided us with fairly good evidence from people as to their travel choices and the use of our car parks. The questions we put to them were aligned to the 9 strategy themes which you'll see in the draft document, and they range from purpose of driving to Basingstoke, why a particular car park was favoured, awareness of other car parks, and also to what extent respondents would be prepared to use alternative travel modes if improvements were made.
Excuse me. Can I ask you to speak up? I struggle anyway, but if you try and speak into the thing, they're not very,
Fine.
I don't think they're very good. So if you wouldn't mind, sorry to disturb you.
I shall project my voice. So 77% of respondents stated they came from outside the ringway, and 21% from inside, and 2% categorised themselves as other, which is quite significant response, because one of them was for a spokesman for the top of town businesses, so we've gathered their thoughts as well. A commuter, which came actually from Wandsworth, and a resident with very little transport connection. So that accounts for all the people that responded. 5% of those respondents stated that they or a passenger they regularly travelled with was the holder of a blue badge. So we tried to look at this as well. So analysis identified the following key messages. That the majority of respondents, that was about 54%, said that they generally travel to Basingstoke for shopping, followed by 20% for leisure purposes, with work being the third most popular reason, and that was at 14%. And interestingly, this ranking was replicated in response to the free text question, which asked, what's the secondary reason for your driving into Basingstoke? Other purposes of driving were given as being a resident, visiting the sports centre, catching a train, and visiting a religious venue. So when asked which part of town they were accessing, most people, that was 55%, said they were accessing Festival Place, by 31% saying they were accessing the top of town. Although shopping, dining out and visiting the cinema and theatre were the main reasons people came into Basingstoke, the free text answer identified that the sports and health centres were similarly important. Respondents stated that compared with the period before the pandemic, most are still travelling to Basingstoke on about the same frequency, and currently they didn't find it any more difficult or easier to find a space than before. So moving on to the car parks that people use, the top 5 favoured car parks were identified as being those closest to the town centre shopping area, unsurprisingly, with the most popular being Festival Place, followed by Joyce's Yard, Alonson Link, which some may know as the Mells, and Caston's Yard, and finally Central. When asked the reason for this choice, we received 160 individual free text answers, but the overwhelming message from which came out of that was they use these car parks for convenience of accessing town centre facilities. In general terms, cost and convenience relating to accessibility from journey origin and the location of the car park in terms of destination once they had parked ranked as being the most important to respondents when parking. We went on a bit further to ask what the awareness was of other car parks located a little further away from the main town centre, which we're talking about Basingview, Brinklet, Sarum Hill and Vine Meadow. And most said they'd heard of them, but would not use of them because they considered they were too far. And the reasons for this included, when carrying heavy shopping, difficulties for older people or those with children in poor weather. Most respondents stated that differing car park charges influenced their choice of car park, and this was further illustrated within the free text answers, where many mentioned the cost of parking, with several references to having a free car parking element. 28% of respondents would support reducing the quantum of spaces where car parks are underutilised. But many respondents mentioned in their free text comments the need for the introduction of more EV charging points, and one particularly suggested a target being measured as a percentage of overall spaces, which we may wish to consider. Responses to questions specifically relating to owning an electric car and the availability of an EV charging point indicated that 82% of respondents did not own an electric car, and therefore the availability of an EV charge point was the least important. 73% of respondents stated they would not be interested in using an electric car club if one were available. However, those that stated they would be prepared to use one said they would probably do so at least on a weekly basis. And in more general car club provision, 26% supported our investigating any options. So moving on to the terms of alternative travel, which people may consider. Interestingly, 61% stated if public transport provision was improved, they would be likely or very likely to use this method. If there were improvements to walking and cycling routes, 58% said they would be likely to use this method, with 76% supporting improvements to the attractiveness and walking and cycling routes. 48% said they would support the introduction of park and stride car parks, but those who stated they did not support this option, they were asked whether a lower charge for parking would change their mind, and 72% said that it wouldn't. If a car share scheme was introduced in Basingstoke, only 7% said that they would be likely or very likely to use this method. So there were a couple of other comments which we received through the email channel, which are worth highlighting today, was that consideration should be given to the introduction of a safe drop-off spot around the town centre, and regard should also be given to non-blue badge holders that have health issues and can't walk long distances before making any plans of removing parking areas. At the end of the online survey, respondents were asked if they had any additional comments they wished to make, and 105 comments were received, of which the top 5 related to the following themes: the availability of free parking, the convenience factor, the opposition to any reduction of parking spaces. Fourth equal was the requirement for a better public transport system, and there was greater support for improved cycle and pedestrian facilities. And the fifth was support for town centre businesses. So in conclusion, this confirms those requirements that residents, business users of our car parks and town centre regard as being important, and reinforces the importance of ensuring that the tests contained in draft strategy theme 1 are thoroughly undertaken when we consider any development opportunities on our car parks. That was a really quick canter through quite a few responses, and I hope if you've taken some notes, this analysis will be available, you know, on request as well as published in a normal way.
Well, I'm going to open it up to questions now, and then to the officers or to the portfolio holder, and afterwards we will make any recommendations after we've done the questions. So I'm looking for Councillor Tustrom. I'll get it right.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, I think having read through this, I must say it was it did seem to repeat itself a little bit, which is a little bit difficult to get through. However, this is very welcome. I think some of the things that are, hearing the results from the consultation actually is really interesting, because that kind of covers a lot of the things you would expect to hear. And I think the thing that I sort of gleaned from this was this idea of potentially closing off some of the more central ones and encouraging this park and stride, which I think is a possibly very dangerous approach, because inherently as human beings we're all just very lazy creatures, and we want convenience, and people want to be able to park, and I think there is a huge risk by trying to make people, to force people to take the exercise, you'll actually just drive them away. That's one of the main things. The other thing is, and I know we will be talking about it later, was this whole sort of review of public transport, and it's great to hear that there is an interest in improving public transport, because I think that's absolutely key, and I think that's something that needs to come first. But it's also, I have concerns, obviously, being involved with county and being involved with all the LC Whip staff and the talk of the massive rapid transit approach and things, that I'm not sure that what's currently in the sort of this is a very sort of very vague thing at the moment, and having, you know, seen what Hampshire are offering, I'm just worried about what's coming, when it's coming, and how fit for purpose it's going to be, and will it actually fulfil the needs for Basingstoke residents that will fulfil this. And if we take away a lot of the central parking, we could be left with basically removing an awful lot of facilities for people, and actually will be very detrimental to the town centre. Thank you.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, really, I suppose on the back of what Councillor Tustain is saying is really just, it's not a question, but I wanted to put a word in for the people that are in the more rural areas. I have people in my ward who are a good 20-minute walk from a bus stop. They are people that need to pay the best part of £7 to get into town. And we are actually equidistant almost to Reading and Newbury. The reason I tend to go to Basingstoke as a preference over going to Reading or Newbury is actually the parking often enough, because it is so much more accessible, and there is more parking here. So I worry a little bit, and I know that in the report it does say that any change would be done gradually and monitored, and I think that is really important, particularly with a view to the fact that, you know, we have got some people that it is going to be a lot more difficult for them to access public transport, to cycle, to walk, depending on where they're coming in from. And what we don't want is for people to make the choice to go somewhere else instead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also agree with everyone who's spoken so far about the concern about taking away some of the parking spaces. Yes, we've come out of lockdown, but I don't think we've finished. I don't think society's finished changing. Whether or not we go back to as we were, I don't know. And I think maybe this is a little bit too soon, this strategy. It's good, but we just don't know what's happening in the world. We're also just gone into a recession as well. So I'm just nervous about it. So people might want to use the train more. We should be actively encouraging public transport. If we haven't got a car, if we haven't got an accessible or an affordable car park at the train station, will people then just drive to their destination? The other concern I've got is Festival Place as a town centre is appalling. I mean, I prefer to go shopping in Reading because there's actually shops there. So again, I think Councillor Carruthers' point as well about pushing other people out is a concern. And my other concern is the town is getting bigger and bigger. The town centre is getting smaller in comparison to the borough in terms of house building. So, you know, people are having to travel further to get into the town centre. So if we take away the car parking, it's going to be a problem. And also our public transport in Basingstoke isn't very good. You know, to hear that it costs £7 to come into town is extortionate. And I think we really, really need to get that agreement from Hampshire. Are they going to improve the bus service? Are they going to increase the frequency of buses? Are the buses actually going to turn up? Because there's real problems at the moment where they haven't got enough drivers. And they need to invest a lot of money to make it workable. So it's almost like chicken and egg situation. So I do feel that we do need a little bit more information on this. And I think we also just need to wait and see how society reacts. So I suppose my question out of all of that is, if we make some recommendations tonight and the Cabinet agrees, disagrees, but approves the draft strategy, what's the next steps and timescales as well? Thank you.
Do you want me to answer all of those, or try to answer all of those points, Chair? There's quite a few, but particularly in respect to that last point, the next steps from here is that Cabinet will consider this matter at their meeting in early December, considering the strategy for adoption. I need to emphasise the point, the strategy isn't actually making decisions, it's setting the framework for decisions. So what the strategy does, it sets out various tests. So if there was a view that a site should be redeveloped for something else, for an alternative use, there are tests within the strategy that allow us to consider how best that should happen. And I think it's making the point that we wouldn't wish to take away spaces if there isn't an alternative provision elsewhere that's equally as convenient, considers the needs of blue badge holders or that locational point for people using the town centre. It's not intended to make the town centre less attractive to users, and particularly those coming in from the more rural parts of the borough, because we recognise, you know, lots of people are dependent upon the town centre for day-to-day needs. So that really isn't the intention of it. But it's really a piece of the jigsaw when you see it alongside the LC WIP, the walking plan, proposals for an MRT strategy that county are looking to publish next year. We see it as part of the solution, really. I think we need to recognise we have set out a climate emergency, we've got a climate change strategy, and this is really one of the objectives of the strategy, to look at the ways that people travel and move. So I think it is part of the solution, effectively.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up where colleagues have left off, really, and not disagreeing with any of the points that have been made. I think the initial report left us asking an awful lot of questions. I think I was reading it with more questions at the end of it than I had, and I get the point now, Mark, in terms of it being a framework rather than the answers. But then again, I guess the question then becomes one of, well, what are the outcomes that you're searching for? And if we're reacting to the current situation, if it's a reactionary thing, then I think that's the wrong approach to take. If you are talking about planning for what you want the town centre to be, then that's a very different question, and it demands a very different set of responses. And I think that's something I think you should carefully think through. How do you want this strategy to go forward? Because if you're talking just, for example, about EV points, well, the EV points we have in the town centre are poor to begin with. None of them are fast chargers, they're all slow chargers, so it's irrelevant to somebody coming shopping because they plug it in and they've got no more charge on their car by the time they come back from their shopping. They don't work, 9 times out of 10 they're out of commission. So the actual quality of EV charging in the town centre is poor. The quality of EV charging on the outside of the town centre is good, and that's usually provided by private providers. So not with the council setting that up or achieving that. So that's a fundamental difference in how people are using their electric vehicles, I think, in and out of Basingstoke. And that's a useful conversation to have. Actually talk to the people who have electric vehicles in the first place to find out their usage patterns, because I think that would tell you something about what we then perhaps need in the town centre. I do agree with the point as well, it's really important about changing cultures. The town centre has gone through hell and back. It hasn't recovered in the same way other town centres have. We have a massive issue on our hands. And when we sat in that debate with Allies and Morrison, with their wonderful response to Hemingway's strategy, their idea was, well, we don't want the cars in the town centre, do we? We want to get the cars out of the town centre. That was a bloke who lived in London. It wasn't a bloke who lived in Basingstoke or lived in a North Hampshire rural relationship to a market town. It's a fundamentally different perspective that we need to take. We want to get people out of their cars, well, let's have a decent bus service. We haven't got a decent bus service, so we can't get people or expect them to get out of their cars. You can't expect this strategy to fit with a mass rapid transit system, when the mass rapid transit system is supposed to be a bus on the existing network. That isn't a mass rapid transit system. So the county are failing us miserably on this in terms of a strategy that has any coherence to what we want our town centre to be for the future. And it's not your fault and it's not your bag, and you're left picking up the pieces, and I respect that. This strategy is called the parking strategy. It should be the town centre parking strategy because it leaves the rest of the borough out. And the rest of the borough have got a say in this. That's one constituency. Those who live in the town centre and those of us who have wards who orbit the town centre are another constituency. My residents, for example, in Wheel Court, take the bus to get into town to do their shopping because they can't walk up the hill with the shopping because of their age coming back the other way. You shouldn't cut out vehicles from the town centre just thinking and assuming that people in the immediate vicinity will just walk because they live closer to the town centre, as the bloke from Allies and Morrison's thought. It doesn't work like that. The Vine Meadow is a fundamentally different car park and its usage and its relationship and for the town centre as opposed to Central. So that differentiation needs very carefully dealing with. And the Vine Meadow has filled up more in recent weeks than I've seen in a very long time. That pattern of travel is beginning to change back again. Now, why is that? Because perhaps most people are now in the office keeping warm rather than at home with the bills. All of that's going on. But that pattern's changed. The trains now are getting much fuller than they were in recent memory. So all of that needs to be factored into this. So I'm just wondering, lots of really good ideas, and your survey responses actually, I think, give you the picture, and those survey responses paint a very different picture to the report that's written. So I'm just wondering, if you're going to jump in with this decision in December, I get that, but perhaps you just want to think about this and pull back a little bit, have a reflection on how reactionary it is and how much we want to plan for the future. And I think that just presents you with a very different complexion of a report and a set of methods to get the outcomes we want. And please talk to us as ward councillors for the town centre. We're happy to talk to you talk to colleagues with rural wards who have equally got issues, talk to us outside of this meeting, beyond just a consultation, maybe organise some workshops that we could take part in with you, and we'd be very happy to help and share our ideas. I'm sure of that from colleagues across the chamber would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Durham.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to say I agree with everything the previous speakers have said. It's just a couple of practical points, really. The introduction of EV points. We've just had 6 put in Bramley. In a small car park we have. It's not enforceable, i.e. anybody can park in those spaces until the TRO is in place. However, they've been there, I think, best part of 2 weeks. I've walked past them or driven past them most days, and those spaces are empty all day, which has basically put 6 cars somewhere else within our community. So the way in which you introduce EV points really needs to be tightened up and tidy and set out from day one, because it's caused all sorts of confusion for Bramley residents. But if you could just make the TROs need to be in place as you put them in my opinion, because we've just got more traffic parked on the roads now. The second thing is a bit of a plea. If you do reduce the parking spaces, can you make the ones that are left a bit bigger? Because there are a lot more bigger cars. I mean, I drive a big car because I don't fit in small ones. But, you know, so many times you see doors bang, and that costs somebody to fix. So it's a real problem that would help people in this day and age protect their property and themselves, because they can't squeeze in to get in. Well, I certainly can't anyway. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for doing this work. It's really interesting and lots of really useful information there. I wanted to echo the points that have already been made, and particularly to build on the point that Councillor Harvey made, because, sorry, I think it's very much about looking ahead. I think that's absolutely critical, that we need to start with making the town centre as good as it possibly can be from the point of view of businesses and residents. And then, once we know what that actually looks like, work out where people should park. I think at the moment we're working out where they should park and then working out what the town centre should look like. And that won't provide well for the future. And I think it's really important that I know that you've done some work already with local businesses and retail, but walking around the town centre, Festival Place, the malls, there is so much work that we need to do to work out how can we help those businesses, those retail places to thrive for a long time to come. And I think it's only when we've done a really good piece of work with them that we'll be able to think about the parking.
Councillor Mullally.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers, for this report. I have a few questions before I start my debate here. And you take the point number 1.115 and 3.13. They say contradictions. One says that HCC will provide a letter. The second one says that HCC has provided a letter. So HCC has provided a letter, or HCC will provide a letter?
Chair, the letter arrived about a week ago, and it's a supportive letter. It says effectively that the strategy aligns with the emerging local transport plan they've prepared, and aligns with kind of general good principles around supporting access to the town centre by alternative modes and recognising the rural hinterland.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you about that clarification. I have one doubt about these appendix data, which is compared with 2019 to 2022. While I agree with my colleagues on the data, and it is getting better year on year. And there is one more important factor that we need to take into consideration. In 2019, there was no St. Michael's Park, which is close proximity to the town centre. And good amount of people, which is this part of the town, and Winchester side of the part of the town, they do go to the St. Michael's Park instead of coming to the town centre. A, the car parking is free there, and it provides a basic, all kind of shops that we needed. So it has taken the significant amount of profit, which is coming into the town otherwise, has gone into St. Michael's Park. So during your calculations, have you taken into the consideration how much of traffic we lost as a town center because of this St. Michael's Park, which has introduced in between 2019 and 2022?
What we've done is to compare parking sales data 2019 pre-lockdown with that for the same period post-lockdown, when we've had some degree of normal life again, albeit recognising it may not quite have settled entirely.
Councillor.
Yes, yes, Chair. What I would like to bring the point here is the data that we are looking at in 2019.
I understand that. But we're going to discuss that amongst ourselves, and we can put that as a recommendation. Otherwise, we'll be talking round. That's the idea, to move it on, just to ask the questions, and then we're going to debate amongst ourselves what we're putting recommendations to the Cabinet to look at, if you understand where I come from. Yes? Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I agree with pretty much everything that's been said by colleagues so far. With the data that's been gathered, it says it's mostly from the first 7 months of 2022. I'm assuming that's pro rata with 2019, rather than the whole of 2019. But again, agreeing with colleagues, the start of 2022 was definitely not normal. The first 3 months or so, people were still very, very concerned about going into crowded places because Omicron was raging at the time, and we were all being told to avoid going into crowded places. So I think maybe better looking at the last 6 months of 2022 and alongside the last 6 months of 2019 and compare those might be a little more accurate, particularly as we're saying about hybrid working having an effect, and yet we're all being encouraged to stop hybrid working. I mean, I think our former Prime Minister, a couple of them back, Mr Johnson, said that he was distracted by cheese when he was working from home. Rees Mogg was leaving sarcastic comments for members of staff about how he was sorry he missed them. And certain media outlets are also accusing home workers of being lazy for not going into the office. So I'm not sure how far we can really judge hybrid working as having an effect until we see what all of this negative campaigning towards those who choose to work from home has. I'm pleased to see that you take that one of the comments on those who are blue badge holders also commented on those who have trouble walking as well, who are not actually disabled, because there's an awful lot of people who have mobility issues who don't have a blue badge. I would class myself as one of those. And I seem to remember at the Hemingway rep, one of them claimed that 15 minutes was a nice, easy walk. When every step is painful, 15 minutes is torture. It is not a nice, easy walk by any stretch of the imagination. 5 steps is barely an easy walk at that point. So I am pleased to note that that is being considered, or at least I hope it is, as one of the responses. Park and stride. Isn't that just using one of the car parks that's slightly further out of town? We're saying 58% support park and stride, and yet we're also told that people don't want to use the car parks that are only just outside the town centre. I'm slightly sort of curious as to how those two things marry up. Anyway, I'll shut up now anyway, sorry about that. Thank you.
I'll come back on a few of the points if that's okay, Chair. I may not cover every single point. I've taken some notes, so we'll see if we can get on.
Sorry about to do it on your birthday as well. Happy birthday. Thank you.
Just picking up the point around the 7-month period, we looked at the same two 7-month periods for each year, but we do recognise things may not have been the same at the start of this year as would normally be the case. But it's probably worth just referring you to the strategy itself. And one of the tests I mentioned earlier was that if there is a proposal to change the use of a car park, say, or in that sense, is to look at the current average from at least a 12-month period and future predicted average car park usage, and to ensure that can be accommodated elsewhere within the town in a suitably located car park. So just to give you some reassurance, it's not taking away car parking spaces without giving it full consideration. Just picking up on the point around supporting business, and I suppose it's the point around this parking strategy is supposed to align with the Allies and Morrison's master plan that we've debated and consulted upon it for the past couple of years. So I think it's recognising the town needs to thrive, and recognising that car parking plays an important part of supporting the town centre, and that car parks, we need to have a range of different types of car park, different locations, different multi-storey, surface level car parking payment options to support those people that want to access the town and to do so in the most convenient manner. And that includes electric vehicle points. And I recognise the point you've made, Councillor Harvey, around the provision there. And I think we're looking to roll those out in more locations. We've got a rapid charger, we've got some fast chargers, but I think there's a need for more of those in the future.
I will have a question. Have we got a date or any inkling, I know some of it, about when they're going to change the one-way system around the actual town centre? Because it will be relevant to car parking, especially at the top of the town. It's an area, obviously, we want to develop. We've been trying to develop it for God knows how many years, and it hasn't worked. But my concern is that if we go too deep into it without any of these, when we know the changes and how they're going to affect us, we could miss the boat, if you know. Wondering.
There's no specific date for that at all, Chair. It's an issue that's been talked about and debated with Hampshire. We've carried out some modelling work to see what the implications are of how traffic flows around the town centre, but there's no firm detail on or proposals to bring that forward at present time.
Thank you. Oh, open it up now to recommendations, what we want to send back to the Cabinet. And obviously I think the officers have picked up quite a bit, but if we could round it up, what in Councillor Harvey and then Councillor
I'll kick off with one. I just think,
Tustrom.
bearing in mind what's been said, I'd like to invite the Cabinet member to work with a task and finish panel. Put a team of members together with you, sit down and have a look at this together. Make that a balance between rural and urban, so that you've got the balance there. I think that's fair, because it does affect everybody. And I'm a town centre councillor saying that, but I know it has an impact beyond. And let's just, break open some of the points we've raised this evening, because we can capture them, try and put them all in bullet points. But there's an awful lot that we've said tonight amongst all of us that's worthy of a bit deeper examination with you, if that was possible, and to support you in making a good decision that we all want to be part of and support you in that. I also think, just in terms of the business point, you can't escape the Basing view. You can't escape the town centre. There's so many elements to what you're talking about that have different pieces of the puzzle, if you like. And I'm just conscious the one size fits all isn't going to work. And I know that's not what you're proposing, but the methodology needs to be cute enough to pick up on all of that. So yeah, as a first recommendation, if the Cabinet member would be willing, that might be a constructive way forward. And I'm not meaning a members' advisory panel, I mean a task and finish panel in support of the Cabinet member.
Following on from Councillor Harvey's pretty similar. I think really this needs to be looked at in a much more overarching strategic perspective with all the transport and planning stuff, and really needs to be fit into a place. So whether that means creating a sort of a timeline that shows how we put all this together and where parking comes out in it. Sorry, it's always sorry, it's all right. I was just saying. So I think this needs to be looked at so that we've got actually this fits into timeline of how it fits in with all the other stuff, which is kind of pretty much what Councillor Harvey said, so that we don't try and take this. I appreciate you've tried to do the framework. I think that might be why it's come across as a little bit confusing, perhaps, and a little bit difficult and raising more questions, because it's trying to come up with a framework of potential outcomes before we're ready for it. So it's the tail's trying to wag the dog a bit, if anything, and maybe we need to just take it back a bit from there.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I think the work that's been done is really, really good. A lot of thought has gone into it, and I think when Mark presented it, how it fitted in with the other strategies, put it into context for me. But my biggest concern is talking about the buses and the improved public transport. That is Hampshire County Council, and the thought of them actually providing it, I just don't think it's realistic. So I would like some reassurance before we move ahead from Hampshire to say they support this strategy and that they are going to invest, because I don't think it's a case of they don't want to invest, it's can they invest? No, we've seen cuts, in all their core services, so are they really going to have this pot of money to then go out and create a whole new bus network in Basingstoke? And without that public transport sign-up, I don't know if the rest of it is deliverable, even though it's very good and even though it does fit in with the climate change. I think we just need that reassurance.
Councillor Mullally, I cut you off, so I didn't mean to, but this is where if you've got something you feel that we should be putting to the Cabinet, please do.
Thank you. So here, what I understand here is some of the references here made in this strategy are categorically promoting the more number of houses, which is drafted in the master plan strategy. So the parking strategy, to me, it appears that, we are accommodating some spaces for more houses, which when it came to this committee, we rejected to build 1,800 houses in the town centre. And this parking strategy is mentioning, especially I'll tell some of the points, this is done to create some space for homes. That is what included in this wording, which giving me some caution. Whether the strategy is developed for purely on the parking purpose or it is developed just for creating some space to build houses and jobs, that wording is really disturbing, Chair, here. So on this purpose, I urge the portfolio holder to categorically consider this parking strategy should be considering the parking for the entire district, not to accommodate few more houses in the town centre. Thank you.
We've got all those issues. Well, I can open it to you, but it's not a question. We've passed the questions, but if you've got something constructive to say.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clear about the objective of this parking strategy is not to take the parking spaces away from the use, but the strategy is to set some tests, set some framework on the use of it, and if there is a parking space that's not utilised, to find an alternative use if there is any that could help towards town centre. But that is not the objective, as you suggested, to make space for the housing. So I just want to clear that, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
It's that chicken and the egg thing. I mean, I'm with Aaron on this in the sense it's the chicken and the egg thing.
Can you speak up?
I'm just holding my head in my hand thinking it's the chicken and the egg thing, because if you're saying, and I get it, we're going to do the study on the car parking results in the spaces being available. Right, now what do we use the spaces for? We're going to build houses in the town centre. You've already said in other strategies that there's 2,000 units coming to the town centre. Therefore, if all of these pieces of the puzzle fall into place, what you're now doing with the parking strategy is providing the spaces to build some of those houses. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, we've said we don't want that. Clearly, we don't want that. The local plan isn't finalised yet. It's on pause, and I respect there's no plan B at the moment. I get that. That's an issue for another debate in another time. But I'm just conscious. I wouldn't want this to be the green light for that. So I completely agree with colleagues. So can we take a step back from this? Can I ask the Cabinet member, would he be willing to do that and work with us to get you where you want to go? Would that be of help to you?
Sorry, Councillor. I think what you're saying, we can put that forward as a recommendation. This is what we're here for. If we're not happy with what's being proposed or what may be proposed, we put that as a recommendation. We do not want to lose car parking where we may need it. We want to make sure we've got the sufficient car parking for the business of Basingstoke to keep it prosperous. And then after that, after a period of time, we can actually look to see what we've got left. It's not one before the others. And I think if we could, I don't know how you're going to word that, but I'll drive her mad. But that I think is right. Sorry, I'll keep on switching this thing off. Yeah, so we'll leave this, and I thank Councillor Dinesh and the two officers for their time. And I don't think it was that painful, but it was very interesting actually. And I think you hope to see you back here again at some stage, because I think it's such a big issue that.
What's the recommendation that we're going to put forward? Can we just sum up first?
Do you want me to have a go? I'll chip in.
Oh, sorry.
Apologies, everyone. I'm asking you all to speak up because I'm actually deaf this evening with a cold. So apologies. I'm hoping that I've got these. So I've got, I think, 5 recommendations. So one is obviously to consider, I'm sure Julia's got better wording than this. One is to consider not necessarily taking spaces away to build homes and units in the town centre until we understand what the local plan is saying, what the new local homes is going to be, and actually what the requirement for parking is, and that the two are interlinked, but one becomes for the other. Excuse me. A recommendation around actually having more of a conversation around a form of task and finish group to actually consider all of the activities before taking the decision on this strategy, and would welcome a further conversation with Cabinet and portfolio holder in order to do that. Really important to consider the overall transport requirements within the borough, particularly around what does public transport look like, and linked to that, a request to understand what Hampshire's intentions are in terms of their strategy, and whether it's an intention to invest or whether they can invest, having a further understanding of that. And a general sort of recommendation around what's the plan, rather than being reactive in terms of the strategy itself. Is there anything else, Julia?
Are we happy with that? Yeah. Right. Yep. We will move on. So, thank them. So. Bits of blooming paper. Right. Item 7, draft council plan, pages 87 to 120. I believe Councillor Bounds, are you opening, or is it the Chief Executive? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Really a very brief introduction to this part of your agenda. The document in front of you really lays out the context in which we have set out this draft council plan. It looks at where we are at the moment and where residents tell us that we are as far as their feedback. It sets out really what actions are our responsibility, and what key partners and services are involved, what the timescales are, and some ideas about the measures to test how we're doing should that area or action be adopted. and we're really clear in this plan about what's our responsibility, what's the responsibility of others. So we need to keep that in our minds when we think about timescales, who's involved, and the measures that we implement. Clearly, it's a draft plan, it's going out for consultation. Myself and the Chief Exec have already started some of those conversations with our public sector partners, with our voluntary sector partners, and some meetings with both SMEs and large businesses across the borough, so we can get their views on it. The great thing about going out and speaking to people that we work with is sometimes they tell us what isn't a surprise. Sometimes they tell us things that are a clear surprise to us and some of the challenges that they're experiencing. For me, the real focus needs to be on how we can help our residents, how we can help and support our businesses, and all of those people, I suspect, will need more help from us than they've needed for quite some time. I am only acutely aware of that. I would appreciate the views and recommendations of this committee. Clearly, myself and the Chief Exec are here to respond to some of those. It may be that you've got questions about what some of the items mean. It may be that you have some recommendations that you'd like us to change very specific things on wording, or it may be there may be some comments that you have that we'll have to take away and add some thoughts to it, or even some thoughts from this committee and from those people who responded to the consultation as well. So I'll leave that there. I don't know whether Russell wants to say anything before you go into your questions.
I suppose just to add to that, just to set it in the context of our policy frameworks, if approved at Council in February, it would be the overarching document in our policy framework, which obviously then drives our budget process. It sets out what we do, so it's a guiding direction. It obviously doesn't set out everything we do because we provide hundreds of different services and the documents would be about 10,000 pages long if it did attempt to do that. But it sets out the key things we would focus on over the next 4 years. And the draft budget that you'll see later has very much been formed or informed by the draft council plan.
Thank you. Right, so open up to questions. Okay, Jackie. Thank
you, Chair. This is a good report and I quite liked it. It's slightly, the levelling up measures are a wee bit challenging for those of us with slightly challenged vision, but something having come from talking about the parking strategy, it's quite interesting because again, public transport is one thing that comes out, and the cycle to employment centres, again, these are below average, and drive to employment centres. So again, we are seeing a common theme coming out. I also noticed that we have an issue with overweight children. We're just on average on that, and overweight adults we are below, from that one. So that's not as good. So when I've gone through looking at the actions, then when I actually look at the local services, then on page 98, the things that make an area good place to live. We've got the health services that's picked up on crime and antisocial behaviour. We talk about that through this. Clean and litter-free streets, there's something in there, and affordable housing is mentioned. But looking at what is obviously coming feedback from people, so road and pavement repairs, which I know comes under Hampshire, but we don't seem to have any mention of joined up working on that one. Parking in my street, again, that comes back to public transport again and all that sort of issues. And I know some of it is incredibly challenging. So those of us within all our wards will know how we have to deal with that one. So those bits don't seem to be represented. So I think the main theme that comes out, I think that's an important one, is around the health services. We talk about the hospital and improved local primary health services, but there's nothing directly on wellbeing, which I think is very important. And I know certainly through the ICB work that's going on, there's the community wellbeing, reaching out to try and do stuff. We're working locally across here about trying to get better wellbeing awareness through the PCN networks and things. So I think that really could do with being pulled out a bit more in here. And obviously the public transport stuff. Thank you.
Did you want to respond to any of that?
Probably a couple of specifics. One which is my favourite topic ever Jackie, which is the ONS data. The chief exec is very bored of me. Keep looking at, and it was something that I would recommend everybody, because levelling up is one of those phrases that's sort of pilloried, isn't it? Because it's got a political connotation. But there's a reality of it for me that says, actually, I would absolutely recommend anybody to go and look at that ONS data and go to that website. And just thinking about some of the conversations that I know have already happened at this committees, it's really useful to understand where we are, and also comparators to people that are actually, or areas that are quite local to us. Because there are all sorts of things, aren't there? There's a headline in, I think it was the Hampshire Chronicle, this week that sort of talked about happy places and what's a place happy. And of course, having been a client of a PR agency, I sometimes have some great beliefs that PR agencies, set up a survey, get you to ask some people, come up with something outrageous, and it creates a news story. The ONS doesn't do that. The ONS uses much more reliable data that gives us some real credible, publicly owned data that helps us with some of that comparison. So I get that and we had long discussions, the chief exec and I, about whether we include it or not, but I would absolutely encourage people to go to that website and do the research. There's something about the ONS data just picking up on other people's responsibilities that I am mildly frustrated where some of the gaps are, because we're a district that actually some of that's difficult to disaggregate for us. First, perhaps some of those services that are delivered by Hampshire County Council. With that in mind, probably the one thing that I would specifically respond to, which I do think is really interesting for us, isn't it, that says actually, I wonder why it is that it's probably easy for us because we have some strategies like the wellbeing strategy that we do with partners, which is very sort of statutorily set up, versus if it's potholes and Hampshire County Council have a website to report them, whether we believe we've got a role in that. And it's something that I'll take away, and I think it's really important that we think about that and say, well, what is it we can do that helps doing that? I'm sure I'm not alone, as one of the greatest things I love doing at a weekend is going on what we would call pothole patrol in our ward, reporting potholes. And it's amazing, isn't it, that actually if you take a measuring stick and you take a picture and you show how big the pothole is, miraculously when you report it, it does actually get fixed. I can see some councillors pulling faces. I absolutely recommend it, because 9 times out of 10 it gets fixed. It may take a little while as far as their assessment of... Well, I say 9 times out of 10. The 9 out of 10 is those little ones that don't meet the criteria, and it's difficult as far as the measurement. So there's something in here for me, which is also, it presents a bit of a challenge, because we often talk about council plan in terms of what the officers do. I think there's also something in here that talks about perhaps what we do as councillors, and there's something, isn't there, about that for our sort of what the LGA would call as a 21st century councillor's role, and talk about, well, actually, how do we enable community? So actually, there is also something in there about that says, well, actually, this is what we directly do, this is what we do with our partners, but actually, how do we also enable people to do things that really make a difference and get stuff done? And I think for me, potholes is one of those things, isn't it, that says, actually, you get lots of reports for a pothole, it increases its likelihood and its speed to get it fixed. So again, I'll take away some of that and say, well, actually, what does that mean for who can do what that makes a difference?
Thank you. Yes, this is great. Thank you. Really interesting. Loads of really good things to get excited about. But one thing I want to be more excited about is business. Because looking at page 101, we talk about marketing business opportunities and supporting our existing and incoming businesses. But it's not very exciting. And I think it could be a lot more exciting. Why do people want to come and build a business in Basingstoke? Why is it the best place to build a business? And I think we should try much harder to work with the businesses that are here and the ones that might want to come, to find out what can we do to make this the best place for you. And I think we should try to convey that a bit more strongly in our council plan.
Quite happy to take that one. It has been one of what I would call the sheer delights of my short period so far as being the council leader, of having some of those meetings with businesses and also getting that feedback from some of the work that was done was by the LGA Peer Challenge team that spoke to some of our business partners to hear such a high regard that's held by our business community for this council. And I think it is something that we should truly be proud of. And how I would categorise some of the feedback that we've had so far about what businesses want from us. Keep doing what we're already doing because it's really effective and it makes a real difference. That sadly isn't very exciting. Keep doing what you've always been doing and keep doing it really, really well. I think there's something about making sure when they tell us things that are really specific, that we listen to them and that we do something about it. And some of those things are quite difficult and controversial. Lots of people will have already articulated perhaps some dissatisfaction about me being really public about asylum seekers in hotels. That comes as a direct response from feedback from businesses saying they are struggling to get their visitors and their business beds booked in this town. That has a fundamental impact on the amount of investment that businesses can do right here, right now, and we need to listen to that and do whatever we can to enact on that. There are interesting things that then become really specific because I can be really cross with the Home Office about that they don't work with us as well as I would like, but there are other things that are directly in our control. And I know it's something that will be very familiar to members in this chamber, that it is a criticism that I have heard over and over again, which I question whether it's in our direct control. It's certainly something that we have a direct influence in, where, do you know what, there's a real issue about the availability of taxis in this borough. So that has a real impact whether you want to go out and enjoy the nighttime economy in the town and you're looking for a safe way home, or whether you're somebody who wants to get your business guests from a hotel to your office in Basingview. So there are some real issues around that. The other thing that I would say, which again we don't always feel terribly comfortable about, is being really proud about how great Basingstoke-on-Deane is. Businesses have been really clear, which is why it is in here, that we talk about place marketing. We talk about this place being happy and prosperous, and sending that message out so that we can, instead of talking down Basingstoke-on-Deane, talk it up, because that's what we hear from our residents, that's what we hear from our businesses, and they're really focused on the more we accept how good it is, the more we work with people who know what it's like to run a brilliant business here, to start up a brilliant business here, the more people will come and invest. And we shouldn't underestimate, if anybody talks this town down, the impact it has on people who've got businesses here to bring extra investment. So it's really interesting, what does that mean? Because for me, there's something about listening to those businesses when they tell us really clearly what they want, which is different. And some of those things I think will be challenging for us, because saying, here is a happy and prosperous place, residents and businesses love being here, come and join us, is sometimes something that when you live in a place, it's really easy to be critical of it. And I would ask everybody to think about, well, actually, why do we love living here? So that's one of those focuses that's, for me, the bit that's bold and interesting. How prepared to do that are we? And the ONS data helps with some of that, which is why I pull those strands together, because we've got a lot to be proud of, and we can do lots of things. And perhaps some of the things that businesses tell us aren't perhaps as obvious and as blunt and as big as perhaps we would expect.
Councillor Mullally.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you very much for this report. And here I would like to mention a couple of points, Chair, with you. So, yes, leader kindly asked us to look into the ONS data. That's what I did. I looked at the ONS data, Chair, and there are 4 areas in Basingstoke identified as the most deprivation areas. One of them is the Brookwell and Kings Furlong. The deprivation index of the Brookwell and Kings Furlong in 2015 to 2020, and it has degraded from the worst 50% to the worst 30%. This is the ONS data, Chair. So yes, the theme is very good, the council priority theme of, where people can live very well, and the action points in 104 kindly identified the two areas, Buckskin and Southam, but Brookwell couldn't make it there. So what I request is, please include a special plan to to eradicate the deprivation in Brookwell and Kings Furlong ward. That is number 1 point. The second one that I would like to bring our attention is to the page number 97, where there is an interesting question here, Chair. The question on the second in the picture or pictorial way is, agree that people from different ethnic backgrounds get on well together, and only 79% of the people in the borough said yes. So this needs to be seen with a filter, Chair, here. Given the 2011 ethnic minority stats, we didn't get the 2022 ethnic minority stats in the ONS yet. We have 11% of the ethnic minority population in Basingstoke and Dean district. And only 79% people said yes. That means 21% people didn't even agree that, right? So I would like officers to carefully observe that 21% of people, are they all from the minority ethnic communities, or they should be having some majority community also agreeing that they're not getting on very well. So this needs to be seen with a different filter, and it needs to be carefully addressed. That's what I would like to bring. Thank you very much, Chair.
Did anybody like to respond? Or?
Quite happy to respond to both of those main points, if I may, Chair. Deprivation, I absolutely agree, and I suspect what may have got lost in some of the detail is actually what sort of activity happens within those wards with the greatest deprivation. So for me, there may be something that, because we think about some of our primary roles that we have as an authority, that may be about regeneration. But of course, if we looked at other predeterminants of the impact of and reality of deprivation, we're talking about health, we're talking about housing, we're talking about safety. So there is something for me, particularly with my role within the ICB, that I take that as full support for health money to follow where the need is. And that is a reality, I think, across our patch. So I absolutely take that forward. And for me, there's also something about understanding what that means as far as access to healthcare. I suspect some of that goes together with your second point regarding whether people get on or feel that they get on well together from different ethnic backgrounds. For me, there is something about the amount of work that there is still yet to do. There's something for me about how much work is being done by this local authority, but also with its partners. Again, in the health and the community safety sphere, also, and it's the bit that we didn't include, but we certainly, I know the Chief Exec has offered it to all political groups, so that actually the comparator's not there for that recording. So actually for other stats, you'll see it talks about South East and national. That score is still relatively high. I agree that 21% is still, an area that we need to focus on. So for me, there is something about understanding what that is. I do love data, and probably the most frustrating bit about that is it won't tell us, are they specific ethnic groups in specific geographical areas, which I think would be really helpful to understand what it is you can do and where you need to do it. But it's certainly something that we can look at taking away.
Councillor Tuck.
Thanks, Chair. The leader rashly asks why we love living here, and he would expect me to say we love living here because of our many chalk streams. Businesses are often greeted on arrival at Chinham Business Park, I know, with a brochure that tells them about the lovely walks that they can go in the country at lunchtime. Unfortunately, there are rather fewer of those now. But I think it's really important that we understand in all of this council plan that access to green space is vitally important for both businesses and residents. But the particular point that I want you to be encouraged with is on page 12 of 16. We talk about create and deliver a new biodiversity strategy. I'd really like you to add including a programme of establishing nature recovery network areas. I don't want us to lose the LNRN concept in this framework. I totally understand you are telling me that there are many strategies hanging below this and everything is not included, but that is a key thing that will be going forward, and it must tie in with our local plan as well as our council plan. And then specifically on watery things, I would really like that we have something in here about rivers. And having had a quiet word before, can we at least campaign for improved management of rivers and their catchments, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Very happy to take the river point away. I don't think it will have missed anybody by that Councillor Tuck is particularly focused on rivers. I think we should ensure that we look at the water quality and the importance of all of our wonderful rivers across the borough. So I absolutely take that one away. I take the LNR point. What I'll probably need to consider with the Cabinet and the Chief Exec is what that means for areas of all designations. Because I know we sometimes in this chamber have a debate about the hierarchy of designations, what that means, what it protects, and how that works across the different areas and how they interact.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Chief Executive. Interesting reading, to say the least, and thank you for bringing it to scrutiny. Just on the ONS data, it is interesting, isn't it, looking at the deprivation indices and being evidence-led. And I think that's my starting point, really. I think any council plan and any budget they're derived of should be evidence-led. And I think that presents us with an interesting perspective on how we might both agree that we have ambition and aspiration for our borough. And I don't think that's in question from any of the 54 councillors that sit on this authority. The difference is that we may well have choices that we might choose to make that are slightly different. And we may have priorities that are given different emphasis because of how we choose to put that. And I think that's an important reflection. I think what we could agree on, and what I'm interested in, is the joined up thinking between both private and public sector, with us being the glue that holds it all together. That has been this authority's strength over many, many years. How that's then reflected in the outcomes that our residents get on the ground is then the challenge from all parties, really. And I think that's a really important point. The previous debate we had gave us an interesting perspective on the county council. And, you know, it's not all, let's all pile in on the county council tonight, because that's not fair. But there is a point to be said whereby the county council, many times than not, is the missing link on a number of our policy areas of concern to members. And so, you know, we can bring others to water when we want them to. There are some that are very hard to bring in the first place. And I think from a county council perspective, that is quite a challenge. We've always punched above our weight as a local authority, and I want to see us continue to do that. So I think the very first point you said was listening to residents. You've produced a council plan, you've produced a budget. I think it's going to be very interesting to reflect on what our residents now say in reply to that. And while by all means we can pass comments this evening, I think having that feedback to inform us in our debate going forward is principally important. A few thoughts. Strategies are great, and this place churns them out like no one's business. Where we've done it in the past, we have sometimes led to having strategies that have been difficult or have caused us problems, such as Horizon 2050. If there was one such strategy that I would love to jettison because of the consequences and the outcomes, despite all the warm words of your predecessors, it is Horizon 2050. And when someone walks out the door saying, my job is done, I've done it now, and growth is on its way, you know, that sometimes those strategies could be the albatross around our neck. And I just think we've got to be careful here. A strategy is one thing, the words are one thing, the meaning behind them is everything, the action plans that sit behind them are everything, the meaning of them is everything. The words on paper get us to begin to go down that road, and you know, I don't want to take away from the fact that this is a start of a process. Just as an example of areas I think to call out, sport and leisure is a major area. It's highlighted in the document and obviously in the feedback. So that's one to look to, I think, as to what the authorities' plans would be going forward to particularly address those concerns around sport and leisure. Around services, I really welcome the investment. It's the second year of seeing significant investment in our staff to then deliver the services that many of our residents look to, and I welcome that. And just 4 areas to briefly pick out of perhaps a different perspective, maybe things that we might do differently. Regeneration is one of them. It isn't just down to our partners to do regeneration. I think we have a responsibility to lead that agenda, which is not to say that we do it all, but that we are the enablers that perhaps achieve an end that otherwise may not be. And where we've done that in the past, we have achieved significant benefit to those communities that have seen regeneration. And that's from Oak Ridge, through Popley, through Bishop's Green, through lots of communities that have benefited over the years from this council's direct involvement. And perhaps there's a debate to be had about what we mean by regeneration. I think there's a big debate over climate change, and obviously you were at it last night at the Green of Basingstoke Town Hall. Lots of different views and lots of challenge for you there as well as an administration, as would be any administration. And I think climate change is an area that we could debate about focus and output and actions that we would like to see. Health and well-being has got to be a priority. I appreciate the meetings that have taken place recently that not all councillors were aware of. There was a town hall meeting or a roundtable meeting that Maria Miller had that was arranged by, is it the ICB? Forgive me the acronyms. They didn't bother to tell all councillors that they were having that meeting. And I think that's to their disadvantage and shame, really. If they want to include us, they should include us. That aside, the point about health and well-being is something this authority, I think, needs to take very seriously as what we can achieve. GPs issues are huge at the moment in our communities, and they continue to be. I know it's not a direct responsibility, but it is a massive issue for our residents that affects everything else. And then there's a debate to be had, I think, finally, just the 4th area I'd highlight, of what do we mean by growth? We've debated negatively, and we've thrown around the debate, and I appreciate the local plan is on pause. We may have a different perspective on what a plan B might be, if there is one. But from the point of view of what we mean by growth, I think there should be a healthy debate in redefining what we mean by that word. Because for our communities, environmentally and socially, that word should have meaning, and it isn't just about house building and so on. I think there's a whole debate to be had about what that word means to Basingstoke and Dean. I would say at the moment the focus is on expansion. I'm choosing to use the word expansion more now, because that probably reflects the conveyor belt of housing estates rather than growth that perhaps we should have a debate about to mean something different. So areas where I would welcome a debate and a conversation with you, Simon, on what the council plan could be, and perhaps areas where we would make different choices.
Councillor Durant. Oh, sorry, are you coming?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to comment on that. I think there are some really important conversations to be had, not least with the County Council. It won't have passed anybody by with the public statements and declarations about some of their financial challenges in the next couple of years, which I'm not going to shy away from. As a leader of this council, their financial challenges are my #1 concern, above and beyond anything in this council right now, because of the impacts that they have on our residents, because of the services that they deliver that are so vital to people's safety and safeguarding, and are demand-led, and that demand is only on the increase. It's important to say that myself and the Chief Executive had a meeting only last week with the leader of the County Council and the Chief Exec to pick up a conversation that we've had for a couple of months now about that closer working and understanding the importance of, we have a higher tier, a dual tier authority system in Hampshire and Basingstoke and Dean, there are lots of things where there are handoffs between services. There are lots of times when our resources have allowed us to pick up some of their financial gaps. And I would say perhaps over the last few years, some of that isn't perhaps done as effectively as it could do, because they drop something and we run around to see actually what can we pick up. And that loses knowledge, it loses members of staff, it loses we have gaps in services, etc., all those things. And all of those things we have discussed as two local authorities to make sure that we better understand their challenges and work together so that we can do all those things for our residents. Horizon 2050, there's a topic. It's often been called all sorts of things in this chamber, but it doesn't pass me by how many members voted for it when it came to this chamber. And do you know, I have mixed views about Horizon 2050. I don't think there's ever been such a powerful piece of conversation with our residents. I reflect on things that perhaps were in there that all members perhaps hadn't thought through, that we were hearing from our residents. I absolutely get the point that we have this toxic word in Basingstoke and Dean, which is the word growth. It's why I choose the word prosperity, because that could mean a myriad of things. Horizon 2050 sets out some interesting tensions for me, because it sends us messages about our residents wanting prosperity, whatever that is, however they experience that. But actually, my observation would be that Horizon 2050 was one of the first times that our residents told us how seriously they wanted us to take the climate and ecology. So it's a mixed bag, and we shouldn't forget that. It is not all bad. There are some very powerful messages in there from all parts of sections of our community. But I absolutely agree. We need to understand, what does that word prosperity, growth, however we want to term it. Again, it's worth sharing that in some of those conversations we've had about the draft council plan with our partners, I spend a lot of time talking about that sort of 80-20 rule, that lots of the housing growth over the last 50 to 60 years has done many positive things for this borough. It has also done some things that we've had to try and mitigate and has some consequences. But there is that reality that we all need to have a conversation across the borough about what that 20% is. Because saying we've done 80% the easy stuff is quite easy to say. To work out what the 20% that's difficult is that we need to do, who we need to do it with, where we're going to be really precise and targeted, and where we put our efforts and we ask others to put their efforts, whether it be Hampshire County Council with how they can help us with economic development, whether it be the local enterprise partnership, where actually perhaps they can help us in areas where actually nobody else can, and to consider what that means, whether it's the new conversation we need to have with central government about investment and what we're trying to achieve as outcomes as well. So I take all of those comments on board, and we can work through that process whilst developing and hearing that feedback, because as Councillor Harvey says, absolutely hearing that feedback is very powerful, and of course will only present us with challenges, because we will have lots of different views, even more than the different views that we have in this chamber.
Councillor Durant.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I fully concur with Councillor Harvey on the use of the word expansion. For those unfortunates on DC for the last 12 years, they've heard me bang on about expansion rather than growth in Bramley. Growth is something positive. Expansion brings with it sustainability issues and many other problems for maybe community by community. So I certainly, there is a difference in definition and use of the word. Secondly, and I may have missed it, I apologise, I'm not too good with some of the font colours and the background colours, because I'm having problems with my eyes at the moment, but I didn't really see anything there in here about homelessness, homeless people, rough sleepers, because a step on from deprivation can be, unfortunately, can be homelessness. We have homeless, a couple of rough sleepers in Bramley now So we're not talking about a town centre problem. Correct me if I'm wrong if I didn't see anything in here, but I do think it's an important thing we need to address in the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to direct Councillor Doven, it's on page 8 of 16, so it sets out to deliver the priorities within the Council's housing and homelessness strategy, including addressing rough sleeping, preventing homelessness and working to improve the standard of local homelessness and support housing facilities. As you know, it's something we put a lot of focus and a lot of investment into it, and one of the things we do very well.
I'm aware that we've done a lot and we've done it well, so thank you.
Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'm going back to the deprivation again. Notice that that South Ham and Buckskin are both included on this sovereign regeneration service, which is great. I saw apparently that the households with one or more of the criteria of deprivation, South Ham's got 59.7%, Buckskin 54.9%. Brighton Hill has 52.9% and Houndsmill and Oakridge 51.3%. So I'd like to make the case for them to be included as well, please, as all 4 of these wards have over 50% of households with one or more of the criteria of deprivation. So if we could do something for all 4 instead of just the 2 worst, that would be brilliant. Thanks, please. Thanks.
Probably just worth saying we'll take that away, Chair.
Yep.
I have a question. It's been touched on regeneration and things like that, and it actually covers the last topic. Can you? It's all right, I do it all the time. It's the last topic. Basingstoke's a growth town, we all know that, and we want the best from Basingstoke, but we seem to have forgotten the areas that were built first for regeneration. And it's not just buildings, it's actually where people live. And I'd like to see more emphasis on saying, well, yeah, we're going to regenerate, we're going to help people, the areas, build back up to what they were. I represent South Ham, as you know, and I represent Buckskin before. It's not all bad. We have poor people, but to make the areas lift up, we need to be talking to them and saying, what do you want? You know, over the years, just an example, we planted out flower beds and whatever, and you talk to Gordon, I can't think of his name, not Gordon Wade, and he'll tell you, he's very good, he'll tell you, well, who put them plants in? They're the wrong sort of plants. We should have a programme and we should be pointing that out. We should be taking them out, putting stuff in that grows slowly and things like that. And the other thing is, when we were talking earlier about roads, and which is Hampshire County Council, but it's not solely Hampshire County Council. We've got a problem with housing associations recognising what they own. And I don't mean the housing, they obviously didn't know that. It's parts that when it was sold, especially the ex-council houses were sold off, it was a bit of a mess if I'm perfectly honest. Some bits were sold off, some bits weren't. And we did get an agreement at one time off the council and off, well, I dealt with Sovereign at the time, that when residents complained about something, they weren't saying, well, it's not ours, you'll have to contact. And I think we should be doing something along those lines. I don't know how you can build it in your plan, but it's working with partners. It's not just highbrow, it's at that level we need to be working with for the simple stuff in life. People live there. And my little pet thing is, and I'm not saying I don't want flowers in the town centre, we spend money on the town centre looking very nice and everything else, but most of the people live outside the town centre. We need to be doing a little bit more for those.
Thank you, Chair. So just to update you on work that's sort of already in train. So in terms of planting and land that's been adopted in the past, certainly historically there's been lots of different schemes adopted that we are going through a programme of reviewing, because it's not necessarily the types of schemes you would adopt now in terms of public realm and planting, and they're not necessarily sustainably planted, and that's one of the reasons we put extra or proposed extra money in last year's budget, which continues through to the proposals for this year's budget in terms of grounds maintenance, because that's a multi-year piece of work to go and change a lot of those areas of public realm, particularly out in the estates. I mean, some of them are the level where you would need a regime of grounds maintenance way beyond a council would ever be able to maintain. And I think, Chair, you're aware of specific areas probably in your ward where you'd literally need someone gardening it, not someone going a number of times a year. So there's a programme of work already underway, and that's one of the reasons we've put extra staffing into grounds maintenance, but it will take some time, being realistic. And then just on your second point, one of the challenges absolutely all stock transfer councils have is a challenge around multiple ownerships. So certainly out in our estates, you have scenarios where one bit of the path is one of the housing associations, the next bit of the path is Hampshire County Council, and then the bit at the end with the grass is us, or sometimes not even as clear cut as that. And certainly that is something where there have been discussions and, numerous different attempts to try and improve that. Part of that is also driven by the work we need to do to modernise some of our operational services and our use of mapping and ownership data, and something we've discussed particularly with the housing associations. But again, that will take some time, but work is underway, and that certainly is part of the plan.
Which is good news, but what I'd like, you can't just always rely on councillors to get that news out. As much as we like to, politically it's good for us, don't get me wrong. And I won't hide the facts, but we need to be saying to these people who live in these areas what we're doing as a council, not as a Conservative leadership or a Labour controlled area. As a council, we need to start promoting what we are doing. Because if, we're trying to get people on board for all the council, the Conservatives, Liberals, Labour, I think time has come where we've got to start working together and getting things done. And therefore, what I'm saying to you really is we need to get that message out as a council, as well as a political thing, which we will do in our own way. But that's another issue. Thank you.
Well, I just wonder if I could respond to that, Chair, because I think there's also something about that, isn't it, about visibility. Which it's really easy for a modern council to rely on Facebook and Twitter, etc., and going, well, actually, of course, one of the things that we're talking about is increasing the size of the ranger team, of being much clearer about how we work with volunteer groups and on specific areas in wards around biodiversity improvement, so people can see what's being done and what they can do to play their role in that. And of course, that works for some residents, it doesn't work for all, but also the reality about the green team, isn't it, that says, do you know what, how often do you get a council employee knocking on your door? Well, actually, with purpose around climate aspirations and insulation and helping people with energy inflation and cost of living, we can do that. But actually, we will also be, fundamentally, we'll be having council employees knocking on people's doors and talking to them. And I suspect some of the areas that you're talking about are those areas that we will focus on, because I suspect some of those residents and some of the accommodation that's there are the people that may need our help the most to understand what they can do from all sorts of funding pots, from support from us, support from other public services as far as improving their life and where they live in their homes. So I am quite hopeful some of that will bring those added benefits. And hopefully we can also have that conversation as members to say what role we can play in that. Because I also understand, as I think we all do, as some of us have been councillors for longer than others, where actually it can be a bit of a surprise sometimes when you get elected about, well, actually what Russell was talking about the council plan not covering everything that we do. When you think about everything that we do, we've probably got, we were trying to add it up, 300, 350 service lines. If you were a commercial organisation, you'd have 20. And actually, if you're an employee in a commercial organisation, you'd probably focus on 5. So as a councillor, it's a really tough job for us to ask of each other, isn't it? It says, do you know what, as a ward councillor, you need to understand everything we do, who is responsible for it, who's the portfolio holder, who's the chief officer that focuses on that? So actually we do have that piece of work to do so that we all get it, and we can all be, whatever our political persuasion, we can all be the best community focused councillor that we can be, but also get the best support from an amazing team of officers that we have here.
Thank you, Chair. I assume we're moving on to sort of recommendation, are we? Are we moving on to recommendation stuff?
Oh, yeah, I think I've got Councillor Harvey once,
Oh, sorry, I thought we were.
before we get to recommendations.
Okay, just quickly.
Yeah, go on.
It's all right. I was just going to pick this point up about regeneration, because to bang the drum on this a bit, actually. The partner element to this, I think, is critical. Now, my recent experience of some of our housing associations is abysmal. So, for example, London and Quadrant, who I have been at war with for the past week and a half, with offices in London and offices up in Manchester, because they're not based down here responding to our residents. That's one example. Then the other example is Vivid, that was Sentinel. When it was Sentinel, we could get at it, we could talk to it. It was an organisation that had relevance to our residents. Vivid, some of the experiences are equal to the experiences residents are having with London and Quadrant and with Clarion. And I know our own housing officers bang their head. Just as one particular example of partnership working that is so critical to regeneration and our understanding of regeneration, because when that relationship with Sentinel was good, was when we got the Oak Ridge Regen done. That was when we were able to reinvest our capital receipts directly into that to enable it to happen. When the partnership working was strong enough that we were talking about with Sovereign about buckskin, and we were talking about fabric regeneration, social regeneration, all of the, to have that leadership role is something I think this authority should do. Now, you're nodding, and I'm hoping that we are on the same page here, Simon, because your predecessors haven't been when we've had this debate. So if there is now a coalescence that regeneration can mean something more than just us giving money to something, but there is a bigger understanding of what regeneration could be for those communities. When I'm looking at the deprivation of indices map, and I'm seeing Popley and Oak Ridge and Brighton Hill and Brookvale and Southam and Buckskin, I'm seeing the old, as it were, estates that are reaching the end of their lifespan, with somebody saying now on insulation, on climate, on all of it, somebody somewhere has to take the lead if we're going to do something. So I just see that as being a significant priority, and I hope you do too.
It's a very easy thing to say, and I won't say which elected member, they weren't from this authority, but elected member was banging on only last week about partnership working, partnership working, partnership working. And when people say that, I'm not sure I always know what they mean, or if they know what they mean. So for me, there's something, isn't it, that says it's really important for us to be really clear about what's the responsibility of our partners, so that when we have that conversation, we're really clear. It just isn't that we have lots of nice meetings, or they tell us how wonderful we are, that we have truly open communication about what's working, what isn't working, what could be different, what can be better. And not naively, but I am heartened by some of the conversations that even having a conversation about a draft council plan has had with some key partners, including housing associations, to say what could be different, what could be better. I would say that about our health partners too, because I think with the creation of the Integrated Care Board and their new statutory responsibility for social and economic benefit and improvement as well, that they want to look at what they can do to help partners. So I'm hopeful that we can coalesce around certain areas where we can all agree we need to work collaboratively, we need to demonstrate leadership. And I'm heartened, to your point, Councillor Harvey, that I think all of those partners have seen us as the leader of place. So we can do that convening and be really clear about let's add some focus to delivery from those partners.
Recommendations, and I'm looking, Councillor Bound, hello.
Okay,
Well,
I was going to say, I think, personally, I think the recommendation coming from myself would be that we need to definitely make this plan be a little bit more robust in focusing on pulling out how we do have deprivation reduction. I think it's excellent on all the green stuff, the climate focus, the biodiversity, which I think is fantastic. But also this and the collaboration that we are talking about. This is absolutely critical. It is mentioned. It does sort of run through the veins of it, but it needs to be pulled out to make it really strong. And it's interesting. I mean, I think if I took my son, you know, I'm just on my own with him, and said, right, we're going to spend Sunday going around looking for potholes, I think I might be given a pretty dirty look at minimum. So what would be nice, I mean, just to give a sort of an example, I was just thinking, this a typical sort of thing, obviously when the guys are out doing the street cleaning and things, if they see a pothole, why don't they report that in? That would be a very practical solution. They're out there and about doing it. So encouraging that sort of collaboration at a practical level. I'm sure there's plenty of other examples. I'm sure the teams will be able to come up with ideas because they will see stuff that is often reflected on them as being a problem, and being Basingstoke getting it in the neck for it, when in actual fact it's not their problem, you know, and it's not their fault. So if they can have ways to do that as well, that will build the team and get those sort of bits of work in. And the last thing, I think, I did mention it at the beginning, Simon, you have talked about it a lot as well, but I do think that what doesn't come out to me strongly in this is that well-being, which also ties in with the deprivation. And I would really like to see a stronger emphasis in the plan around well-being initiatives, community working. I know I'm working at the moment trying to get Vivid Plus and with MenCap and all sorts of things, and Basingstoke, to try and do some sort of green area regeneration locally, which goes into Tony and his flowers and stuff. But, you know, this is the sort of thing. So that's community collaboration, partnership collaboration. You know, it's pushing Hampshire where we can to make sure that they are stepping up to the mark. Thank you. I'll shut up now.
I've assumed you picked up all the other pieces we've done. I don't know if you've got a list there. If you'd like, if you haven't, you want to read it out
the chief
quickly,
exec is quickly typing, and I'm going to say something. He said, oh, there's no need to mention it. All of our teams have just been given the technology to do exactly what you discussed as far as reporting potholes. So, hey, how about that? Although, there's also a reality, isn't it, that says, I think we can make it fun. So we can get those kids out there pointing potholes, because actually there is, and I'm bizarrely being serious, because there's something, isn't it, that says, there's something about supporting our young people to be really good, strong citizens of our place, and actually taking responsibility. So our teams will be able to do it, but we also need to make sure that everybody accepts their responsibility for their place.
Andrew sat in that seat as leader of the council, Andrew Finney, a good few years ago, commenting about a piece of kit that the council was buying that people could walk around the streets with, that would identify and do the kit. So it's that point about council plans becoming reality and people taking them forward. And that was 20 years ago, so it's brilliant that it's now been delivered. But it's just a reflection, shall we say, of something. So
I absolutely, probably the biggest piece of feedback that I will reflect on this evening is my comparison to Andrew Finney. And take it as a challenge to deliver.
Hang on, can we sort of get a move on? We've got a big item coming up. So just the recommendations, have you picked up on all the recommendations, or do we need to read them out?
Chairman,
in general.
Chair, I've got numerous comments, which I would suggest I don't read out, because there's a lot of them, so that'll add quite a... But the two recommendations, certainly I just heard, was greater focus on deprivation reduction and greater emphasis on well-being as actual formal recommendations. But obviously the committee may wish to put forward other ones.
Are we happy where we are at this moment? Because it is a plan, it's a draft plan. So
the other thing I said was about collaboration, pulling out the collaboration.
I beg your pardon, yeah, the quality of water, the water quality in the rivers. Can we make sure we pick up on that one? Otherwise, I won't be a chair for very long, I don't think. I just, before we go to the next item, I think we should have a comfort break for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, 5 if possible, but 10 if needs be. Thank you. Right, item 8, the draft budget. Or what, is it draft? I assume it is draft, yes, because it's going out for consultation. Councillor Isaac, do you want to introduce the paper?
Yes, Chair, we're delighted to. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As you say, these are the draft proposals for the 2023-24 budget and the revised medium-term financial strategy through to 2026-27. As you say, this is out for consultation, public consultation at the moment. And coming here this evening is also an important part of that consultation, so I look forward to hearing your views. I think the headlines are we're in a strong financial position as a council, and we have a residual MTFS budget gap which will need to be addressed in the years ahead, but it's a balanced budget for this coming year. But I'm confident that that gap will be closed. You've heard this evening about and you've discussed the new council plan proposals. This budget and MTFS are very much informed by those proposed council priorities. We have a stable, sustainable fiscal position, which I think is well placed to meet many of the risks that beset us generally as a country at this time, not least in much higher inflation and the serious impacts that has on our residents' ability to meet these higher costs, and therefore the even more important role that we have as a council to provide good services, meeting our responsibilities. And obviously there is the threat of unemployment around the corner. I hope that won't be too much of that, but it's clearly there as a risk. This report demonstrates that we have a strong balance sheet with diversified investments, sizable reserves and zero borrowing. That strong position enables us to propose a number of, I think, important measures for 23-24, which will be of assistance to our residents. And that includes freezing of our share of the council tax for next year, freezing of car parking charges, which I think will help not only shoppers but also businesses, attract people into Basingstoke, I hope, and freezing of the charges on the popular garden waste service. And a general point to make is that we are proposing a below inflation average increase of 3% on fees and charges. For the second year running, we're looking to invest in our key services. As you've heard earlier, that includes a new green team of 6 officers who are going to be visible, providing in-person assistance to residents and businesses to help their energy costs and reduce their carbon emissions. And it's all part of our commitment as a council to our climate objectives. Also, we're proposing to expand our ranger team so that we can provide better support in relation to biodiversity initiatives and help with conservation groups. And again, that flows from our declaration as a council of a biodiversity emergency. We're going to make permanent 6 temporary grounds maintenance staff, so we can make sure that not only the town centre is beautiful, but other parts of the borough are planted up and well maintained. And also, I'm pleased to say that we are adding 4 permanent planning officers, because that's a very important function of the council, and we need to make sure that we provide a fast, efficient service for our customers. As always, it's important that we continue to be able to be in a position to afford this expenditure. So we must remain vigilant on costs, especially at a time when there are these much greater inflationary pressures, and meet the savings targets that are outlined in this budget. One of the benefits of increased interest rates, and I realise there's some disbenefits, material disbenefits, but one of the benefits is that our income from our treasury management is projected to rise quite significantly as a result of the base rate rising very rapidly from 0.75% to 3% currently. So that really sort of is a whiz through a document that's involved a considerable amount of work and thought and care on the part of Sue Curtin and the finance team, with some input from me. And I think I'd just like to reflect that it's very interesting to hear some of the reflections of the peer group that visited us recently and have drawn from councillors and officers across the country, and the extent to which they was very, very envious about the strong financial position we are in as a council. And I think it's important as a council we don't lose sight of the need to maintain that position and be very careful where we make commitments in terms of expenditure.
Thank you. I open it up to questions. Have we got any questions? I'm looking around. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you. And yes, thank you for a huge amount of work that's gone into this. I wanted to ask about the festivals. I see that we do have money set aside for one of the festivals. I think it's the Kite Festival. But I wanted to ask about the other ones. There's the Festival of Sport and the Transport Festival and the various other festivals that we've supported in the past. And I know certainly we supported them last year. Will we be supporting all those festivals again this year?
Sorry. We are, it doesn't directly answer your question, I'm afraid, Councillor, but we are providing in this budget for an additional 100,000 in relation to the Basingstoke Festival, £100,000 in relation to the Basingstoke Festival. But I'm going to have to turn to our Section 151 officer to answer that question in relation to those other festivals.
So just to clarify, one of the budget proposals put forward in February this year was obviously to reduce the funding for some of those other festivals. That was postponed for a year whilst officers could work with those providers to try and find other ways of actually funding those services. So that's a piece of work that's underway. So that proposal should come into effect next financial year. So that would be a reduction in the financial support to those organisations, but that's given the extra period of time to try and work with them to find other ways of funding those activities.
Thank you, Chair. I think with the grounds maintenance and the planning and development, they're temporary to permanent positions, so they're not technically an increase. Is that So that's good, because it means we've got that regular work, but is that enough for what we need to get done around the place? That's one thing. And also the environmental health, I think we've got 2 extra people. Will that help with things around sort of ASB issues and things like that, or is it more sort of internal? So what's the roles that are happening there? Thank you.
Well, I think it's fundamental that we have decided that having taken emergency measures and recruited 6 ground staff to overcome problems of last year, that we've actually decided that actually that we need to maintain that level of service. So I think it's a fundamental shift in the whole approach to resourcing on that. So I think it's a very positive move on our side. Again, Sue, on the environmental health, I'm not sure what the relationship is with ASBs.
Yes, so the actual additional 2 FTEs around environmental health are absolutely to do with some of the activities around our car parks in terms of unlocking and locking the car parks, but it is very much to try and deter ASB in these areas. So yes, there is a fundamental link between ASB and those 2 additional officers.
Thank you. Last year we talked about the pest control fee in that there was a proposal to introduce a fee of £20 for all of the pest control services, for everybody across the board. And we didn't bring it in last year, but does that mean that we have brought it in this year? And if so, have we done a proper impact assessment as to the effect that will have on everybody around people that can't afford that?
It was as a result of the consultation undertaken with the public for February 22, that was removed from every year of the MTFS, so there's no intention to introduce that charge.
I have one. It's about the garden waste, which is good news in one respect, but I just wonder whether you could actually look at it again, because I'm not a gardener, I will say that, and I might be totally wrong, that 2 months of the year, usually December, January, people don't put much in these bins. I wonder whether there's scope to actually reduce the fees by having it as a 10-month service. Now, I might be wrong in as much to say that people want the whole 12 months, but I just wonder whether it's something that could be looked at.
Yeah, we can look at it, but I think that what people pays for the annual service, and what we're doing here is holding down the cost of that service, for freezing that cost down for this year. So I think that it's that's how it can work.
As I understand it, that side obviously makes the profit to pay for other things. It's not running as, I might be wrong, just tell me if I am, but I thought as a service it was making more, for the money paid in, there was money made from that, and that went into other services. And if so, should we not be looking at, especially this day and age, this year in particular, when people are going to be tightening up, and I do wonder, even with the reduction of the bins and everything else, whether they will actually sign up, because it's one thing if you're short of money, that's the one thing that will go, and then our recycling rates and things like that will not look good here. Well, they're not great at the best of times, but yeah.
But I think the point is, Councillor Jones, that it's a popular service. There's good demand for it, and so I think that we've had problems with it in terms of being able to deliver the service over the last 12 months, and therefore I think we're taking the right step at this point in actually holding the cost of it down.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Just following through on that, at a different angle. Yeah, the garden waste service this year was difficult and big postback on not being collected. Was I going to get a rebate? Did I get more weeks? Well, that kind of management of the process was quite complicated. Another fallout from the bin collection bit was the policy of people having to pay for black bins when they need replacement. And one of the interesting aspects that we found this year in casework has been the insurance requiring, because of course we now say it's your bin, you've bought it, it's your responsibility, your insurance covers it, the ability of insurance to actually cover it on the basis of proving what has happened to it. Now, because of the crews, because of the way Serco have operated, a number of residents have either lost their bins or their bins have been lost or been damaged by crews. It's been a debate over basically how they've been damaged and the rest of it. But the problem has been the criteria applied to whether or not they can get a replacement bin. And there's quite a market out there at the moment in replacement bins. So I'm just conscious of asking Cabinet, I think, must perhaps have a look at the criteria or the strictness of the process in the issue that we've had with Serco operating as they have done, causing problems as they have done for residents. In a normal year, debate the policy, but I get the policy that you've brought in. I will debate it with you and we'll disagree over it, that's fine. But you've got every right as the administration to bring it in, I get that. This year's quite exceptional because of the Serco issues that people have had, and they haven't gone away. So whether it's Waste Team that need to pick it up to look at it in relation to the application of the criteria because of the circumstances, or whether the policy needs to change, or whether we look at the finance and the budget part of it, just that area perhaps is worth looking at because of the casework response we've had.
Okay, Councillor Harvey, yeah, I think we'll look at that. But is this a problem that's associated with Serco's service and the loss of bins? Because I'm sort of struggling to understand what they've got to do with loss of bins.
As in the bins not being brought back to where they were, bins going missing as following collections, lots of issues to do with Serco damaging bins, and residents being unable to replace the bin or deal with it on assurance if they've had to go down that route, or the issue that because of our criteria they can't get a bin for free or they can't get a replacement bin, they've got to pay for it, and being in the circumstance they can't afford to pay for the bin in the first place. So I'm just saying the criteria, it's a particular set of circumstances rather than a generic policy point.
So I'm sure the Cabinet member responsible, Councillor Bean, is aware of this, but I will speak to her about it and see what can be done in relation to making sure that there's more care taken by Serco in returning the bins to where they found them. I get the point. Yeah, I know. I'm familiar with the problem in my area. Yeah.
Jackie?
Just a quick question. For the garden waste, there's this transition from sacks to bins, and obviously that's going to be raising revenue. How much are residents going to be charged for a green waste bin?
While I'm just on that subject, though, that we are aware of the sort of impact of that change, which will be a beneficial change, I'm sure, but there will be certain residents who might find that quite difficult initially, at least, or maybe at all times to move from plastic bags to bags to bins, and we'd have to make provision for those residents, and that's something that we discussed and understand needs to be taken into account.
While we're on about bins, the only question I'd have, and it's really not your portfolio holder, but portfolio, is the fact that we're going to smaller bins, green ones, wheelie bins, and that. But certain areas, and you say in your paper that they can continue with the sacks, I understand, or some form if they live in a place that can't be done, which sounds very reasonable, to be fair. But when we came to the black bins years ago, we had those provisions in place, and they have disappeared. I know we're talking history here, but it does annoy me when we have these things in place and we suddenly change. Oh, that'd be fine in 2 years' time. There's a reason to get rid of them. I'll give you an example. It's not my ward anymore, but we'll give you an example. In Pentland Close, there's some houses at the top. Serco refuses to pick them up where they'd been picking them up for years because it's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. But it's all right for the residents to wheel them down. And that's the concern I have. I don't think perhaps the budget is the right place to raise it, but I will raise it if you see where I'm coming from. I think the idea you've got safeguards in there is good, but we should be looking at safeguards for everybody, for all these bins, if you know it.
But well, again, that's one of the benefits of coming to these meetings is that we can draw on your experience and things that haven't gone as well as we would have all wanted, and so I'll feed that back through to Councillor Bean.
To be fair, it wasn't Councillor Bean who I had discussions with in the past, so, sorry.
So in response to your question, it's £36.05.
And a subsidiary on that one then, so is, a subsidiary on that is, so low income, are they 50%?
Thanks, Chair. Just still on garden waste, just really to ask the question, you know, we're going to start insisting that everybody has the bins, and we say here this is expected to generate additional income of 0.13 million. Now, in a recent meeting when we talked about recycling, there was a lot of emphasis on how we were reliant on increasing the use of this service in order to increase our recycling rates, and it seemed to be that this was going to play an important role. Is it therefore right that we're looking to make that income? Would it not be better to consider reducing that a little bit and making the service more accessible by reducing the cost of those bins, so that we've got more chance of increasing those recycling rates? Obviously it's part of our climate commitment, so it's just a question.
Yeah, I get the point, but you know, there's a balance to be struck here between doing whatever we can to encourage that sort of behaviour that's going to help with recycling, but also being in a position to be able to afford to provide those services. And you know, I think the fact that we are freezing those charges for this financial year does demonstrate that we get it.
Just a quick question on the festivals again. Has, such as the Festival of Transport, has the funding been reduced or has it been cut completely? And do we know if they've been able to source alternative funding or sort out their funding? Thank you.
Right, I think we'll have to come back to you on that. I think it's been cut. It will be cut, and therefore we'll have to come back to you on what the current state of things are with those particular festivals.
Can I ask one very quick question? Dial-a-ride, we were going to do a review as to whether we should cut any dial-a-ride services. Did we conduct the review and what did we find out, please?
Can you answer that one, please?
So we'll have to come back on the specific details, but I understand the report went to Cabinet, I can't remember whether it was earlier this year or later on last year, where that was picked up. So, but we'll come back and confirm that for you.
Is there any more questions of Councillor Harvey? Sorry, you have to speak up, Paul. Oh, have a comment.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that John said, and just for the record, can we thank the officers and thank the team for producing the budget, because you always do produce, a sound financial position. The choices we might make is a completely different debate to have. But to have that luxury of having an authority in the financial position that we are in is a good thing, and it's been like it for many, many years. So to see that continuing is a good thing. Obviously, that enables us to make those policy choices that we would want. Welcome the staff increases. That's really good. Also welcome the option in here, the budget provision for a review of waste. So that budget provision to review the waste services going forward is also really good and welcome. And that's important. The one thing I did draw my attention was on page 154, and again it comes down to the investment choices, and it comes down to just the, I'm not going to use the word threat because that's inappropriate. I think the word risk is well chosen, but the potential changes that impact the budget of that 1%, when you look down the list, it is significant. And I think, as members, it's just worth noting the point about employees. I do note the point about interest rates and how that affects us potentially positively in the sense of what this authority would then have as income to spend on services. The sadness is of the way it's basically screwing our residents left, right and centre in terms of mortgages and rents and the God knows what else. But this authority benefits. But that list is quite important. I think the rental income, and I did also know council tax, are also significant figures for us. So just paying attention to that in the budget is worth it, I think, in terms of what we're exposed to going forward and understanding that for your bottom line. But no, welcome the budget in terms of a sound financial position, but just say, I think we could have a debate about the choices of what we might do with it, but isn't it nice to be able to be in that position of having a debate about what we might do with the choices to invest for the future compared to where a lot of our colleague authorities are, who are in dire straits at the moment, serious dire straits.
Yeah, I'm always happy to have a debate with you, Councillor Harvey, about what the priority of where our revenues should be directed. I think the guiding theme, though, for us as a council is that we live within our means and we do not borrow, and we do not get, therefore we have not got ourselves into some of the difficulties that other councils have got themselves into, so long may that continue.
Sorry, can we just, there was a few things picked up with the festivals and things. Have we got any recommendations to take forward to the Cabinet? Sorry.
I don't have a recommendation, Chair, but I've just got a general comment, if that's okay. Yeah. So I'd just like to thank the officers and Councillor Isaac for this budget. I think we are in tough times, and I think that's been very thoughtful to all the residents, and I think I certainly welcome the council tax, well, our section of it, the freeze of it, and also the freeze on parking charges. And I just want to say, as a council, I am proud of this council's financial position and the services that we offer, because of our achievement with our finances, I suppose you could say. We're in a position where we can offer residents a lot of extra services and a lot of benefits and reach out to those who need it, unlike other councils. So I'd just like to say thank you.
Is there any direct recommendations we want to put forward?
I think, could we have the pricing for those bins added in so people have just a bit better clarity around that? I don't think there's anything else.
Thank you. Thanks for waiting. And, thank the actually, one thing I would say is the paper itself was a very good paper to read. I did actually understand it, so we're getting along a bit. Item 9, which is committee recommendation for tracker. It's a paper to be noted. I know it's in very small print, but it was done very quickly, and we will be having it in big print in future. Is there any comment on it, or do we, yeah, we're happy with that? Good, good, good. Item 10 is the works programme. Everybody's had a piece, we've had one works programme come forward from Jackie. Sorry, beg your pardon.
If I may make a comment, Chair, both the customer services or customer experience strategy and digital strategy, due to additional work that officers are undertaking on these strategies, unfortunately they won't be able to come to January, and therefore recommending that they come to March.
That's fine. Because in January we've got another full programme. I know we do seem to get through it, which is quite good news, but we don't ever want to get caught out, gone past 9:30. So I promise you that's where I work towards. Also, yeah, I've got that here. Sorry?
The local business, the last one that
Yeah.
was something that was suggested at the beginning of the year, but I'm going to lose it.
On where has it gone?
It was just a suggestion back early at the original chairs meeting.
Yeah. Sorry, beg your pardon. On 174, how council works with local businesses, we haven't got anything going forward to that, so that would be most probably picked up next year, I would imagine. It's and also, there's so many bits of paper here. We are going to be moving. Where's it gone? Lost it. There. No, we got this the transport one for the bus service. Are we in agreement to try and push this forward? Yes, and we're looking for this as soon as possible.
We can put it to officers to see if they can bring it in January, but obviously we'll let the committee know.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. A particular point about this that I'm quite happy for this to go as and when, if the public transport review isn't done until later rather than earlier because of workload, that's absolutely reasonable. However, what I would like, and I did, we have corresponded about whether or not we could get Stagecoach in sooner rather than later, because residents and businesses are being severely impacted with cancelled buses and their driver shortage, and we really would like to, in the same way we heard from Serco, I think, to get an idea about what their plans are and their strategy is to try and resolve some of the issues they've got. So that might be something, if we could get them in even as early as January, that would be fantastic. Obviously that's going to be down to them.
Yeah, so absolutely, we can speak to our partner and see whether they're available to come and join us in January.
I will say, and prove me if I'm wrong, when we had Serco in, I think there has been a difference in their attitude to the service. So it has made a difference. I thought we'd done quite well on that. And there we go. And the digital IT, that'll be moved to January, to March. Well, I've got January. Sorry, that'll be March, and that's it, isn't it? So at the next meeting, which will be in January, it'll be quite a hefty one, but hopefully we can get through it.
Just really quickly, Sue, given we've got the SWO closure report coming to January, any chance of being downstairs in the committee suite? Is there any chance of us being downstairs in the committee suite by January to discuss the SWO? Is there any chance of us being downstairs in the committee suite to discuss the SWO on January?
The issue has been with a part that's required no longer being available, so we're actually looking at an alternative, because obviously we've recycled the equipment from the old committee rooms, so that is in hand, and I will try my hardest to get us back into the committee rooms.
Well, hopefully the microphones or my hearing may improve. But the only thing I would say, and I will speak to other chairs, I'd like to see the layout slightly different personally. But that's an aside. And all I'll do is thank you very much for tonight. Been a bit all over the place, I do apologise, but it was a big agenda, and I think, was it 9:10 nearly? I think we've done well. So thank you very much. I want to thank the officers for their time and indulgence of me, I think.